Hey, Potter's House family, thank you for joining us for this moment, this time, this service. I know you were probably expecting a podium and someone just to be preaching behind a podium, but we're going to extend the conversation from the message that was preached last week, Don't Run from the Tension. We're going to have a moment where I've invited some really powerful men to share in a dialogue and to dig deeper into the tension that we feel in our world today. And we're so glad that you've joined us today. We pray that something is going to be said and done to impact your life. So pull your chair up a little bit closer, turn the volume up just a little bit louder, because we're not running from the tension. Today, we're going to embrace the tension. Today, we're going to dig deeper in dialogue. And there's some areas that we're going to deal with that are relevant to the times that we're in right now to deal with tension. Now, these are not all the areas, but these are some of the areas, and we feel like it's really going to impact the lives of those that join us today. So I'm joined by some great men of our church, even family members here on this panel. And guys, we want your lives to be impacted by what we share today. So without further ado, last week I kind of talked about what a tension is. The tension is there has to be two opposable forces trying to pull something in different directions. And we see that, we feel it with political tension, with the racial tension, different perspectives about the coronavirus. Should we go back? Should our kids go back to school? Should they not go back to school? Should businesses open? Should we just shut everything down? There's so much tension in the air we breathe. No, but I really want us to dig a little bit deeper. And one of the first areas we want to unpack today for you is we want to talk about the tension about fatherlessness. And we have some men on this panel today that are very, very passionate about being fathers. And so Pastor Keys has joined us today. And we want to talk, share with us, let's talk about fatherlessness. What have you seen? And what do kids need? You've been an educator, not only just a pastor on our staff, but you've been an educator. Let's unpack fatherlessness. What does it look like for you, and what is it that we need?
Pastor Travis, first I want to give some pulverizing numbers. 24 million children live without a father in their home. 94% of inmates, or those that are incarcerated, didn't have a father in the home. 85% of children that are in Hispanic homes don't have a father in their home. 70% of children end up going into juvenile delinquency. 71% end up being in crimes, lower end crimes. 63% become rapists. So fatherlessness is the scourge or the scourge of our time. You talk about a pandemic. This has been a pandemic for years. And so teaching in the Washington, D.C. area, I've taught in affluent areas. I've taught in the inner cities, mostly in the inner cities. And I would see that there was a magnetism to me from sons and daughters alike, male and female, because number one, I was consistent. I was there every day. I was present. Number two, they would like to be close to me, smell me, just as our children just want to touch our beards or our mustaches, or touch the hairs on our arms, or smell us, or just be close to us. These children without fathers experienced someone that was present every day in a positive light. And so fatherlessness is really a pandemic, not only in our nation, but in the world. And I learned so much from the students that I was around with. Their perseverance, their strength, their ability to overcome, even without a father. But not having a father in the home is such a detriment.
Why is there such a gap? do you feel? Why is there
The scarcity of fathers and the gap in between not having a father in the home, it contributes to two things, mostly two things, prevalent two things, divorce, and then the second prevalent thing, it comes from what's the word? Unwed pregnancies. And so these two are the major contributors to fatherlessness. Poverty and then incarceration is next. But the first two, unwed pregnancies and divorce, are the main ones that, just from the data and research, have showed why fatherlessness is so prevalent in our nation and in our homes. The psychological trauma that occurs from children, from not knowing who their father is, or maybe their father was incarcerated or even transitioned early. We don't know what the situation is. And so it almost transfers into mental illness or mental health issues from not having a father.
Wow. So thank you, Pastor Key. So Pastor Chris, what do you feel like, what do our children need? We've heard the numbers. We've just heard the numbers, and all of us on this panel are present fathers. What do our children need from us?
They need to be put in timeout for about 23 hours out of the day. Let's just start.
Hallelujah.
I think, especially when you're talking about fatherlessness, it's very prevalent in the African American community.
Yeah.
And my story is, I was 20, going on 21 years old when I had Harmony. I'm in college. I didn't know what in the world I was going to do. I didn't know how to raise a kid, but I did know that I wasn't going to leave her alone.
Wow, it's huge.
So the first thing I think, as it speaks to father, you want to be present. You want to make sure you step up to the plate. Whether you know what to do, know all of the answers, this is my responsibility. And I refused to be a part of that statistic that I was going to be absent just because, I had her before, I got married. Yeah. And I made sure that I was always present. I never put the road before her. It was always, she was my priority. And one thing I think I've learned being a father is, after you are present, your kids need this thing called affirmation.
Wow.
Affirmation is like fertilizer to the seed. And it's when you begin to affirm them. I would tell her at a young age, you are not a failure.
Wow.
You know what? You are more than enough. You will never have to look for a man to tell you that you are enough. Your daddy is telling you that you're enough. Wow. And I think we need to do that. We need to affirm our kids. We see it with this example in the Bible with, God and when Jesus is baptized, John baptizes him, he goes down, then it says the dove descended from heaven, and this was a voice from heaven spoken. It said this thing: "This is my beloved son." He could have stopped right there. "Son, I love you." Then he said, "In whom I am well pleased." Jesus has not performed his first miracle yet. So his father was pleased with him before he did anything. Wow. Hear ye him. He stepped in. He was activated to walk into his potential and his purpose. So as a father, I think affirmation is extremely important, to affirm our kids, to tell them that they are more than enough. I've told my boys since they was born, y'all know the story. Listen, you are a genius. You are a genius. You're not average. I don't care what the test scores say. I don't care what your teachers say. Your father's looking at you and telling you, you are a distribution of God taking place in the earth. Yeah. So walk with your head up. You're not going to be defined by this environment. Wow. I'm defining you. Wow. And I think that's important. You set your kids up to win whenever when they're walking with the affirmation that is their birthright. They don't have to earn it. You was born with it.
Wow. Joe, do you?
I think when we look at COVID and how it exacerbated underlying conditions, fatherlessness is one of those underlying untreated conditions that a lot of this racial tension and COVID has really heightened for us. It's illuminated for us the idea that without a young man understanding a voice of authority from a young age, that this voice of authority is not here to harm you, that this voice of authority is not here to break your manhood, that this voice of authority is not here to threaten you, then when we release our boys to become men and put them in scenarios where they have to be told to be quiet or told to be subdued, then there's this automatic resistance and there's this kickback in them because there's never been, for some of them, a present voice that has not also been harmful. And so we raise a generation that grows up without a father, someone to set safe boundaries, someone whom when they hit you, when I spank my son, I hug him every time thereafter. Yes, I spank Zach. You may see him running around and twirling, but believe me, that twirl and running and loudness has been checked by his parents at home. We've tried our best, but when that happens, I want him to know that there's some comfort. There's a rod and there's staff, but then there's comfort because this correction is being handled in a shape, in a format, in a context of love. And without that love, with the correction, with the authority, you raise a generation that is wild and rebellious, and they mature into adulthood without Chris's point about affirmation, still looking for who they are as a man. So now they have adult body parts and adult responsibility. They're seen societally as an adult, but they have not been equipped with the tools to understand what the voice of authority means, to understand what a voice of affirmation means. And so they try to define their affirmation by music videos, or they try to define their affirmation by society or their peers, or wrong influences shape their perception of self. And so when they're engaged in culture, we raise a bunch of men who were raised by mothers where single motherhood was incentivized and fatherhood was marginalized. Wow. What do you mean by that? I'm saying that there in my community where I'm from, a single mother could qualify for housing assistance in such a low price if she was there by herself. So systematically, her singleness was incentivized. The minute she moved a man into the house, the whole bracket of how she was able to pay for housing, a requirement, a necessity of life, it changed dramatically. And so we have seen fathers pushed away from children because if parents and families were to survive, their single motherness was incentivized. They could get more food stamps if they didn't have a man in the house. They could get better housing for their children if they didn't have a man in the home. And so we watch this generation of men be raised without a father. Then we release them on the world and we tell them, don't resist. Don't resist arrest. Don't resist the culture. Don't resist someone telling you to do the wrong thing. Don't resist, but you've learned how to live in this world where you have not been affirmed. And so I've seen adult men in their early 20s not be able to make the turn into adulthood because there's so many steps missing in those interim moments where they should have been able to enjoy a childhood or should have been able to play catch with their father or should have been able to be mentored by a teacher or by a man at the boys club. And so now they're becoming something that they've never seen. They're becoming a dad, but they're having to be something that they've never felt, which is almost impossible.
That's called tension.
And I think the tension is you've never seen it modeled in front of you.
Yeah.
So how can I emulate something that I haven't seen being modeled?
How can I give my children?
Yeah.
How can I give my children something that I've never received, which feels like torture, right?
Yes.
Because you're giving your child a better childhood than you've ever had. And that tension it's prevalent in all communities, but in the African American community, we have a lot of first generation dads, not fathers or people who provided seed, but we have a lot of first generation of men who are staying at home with their wives.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things you made me, we can't talk about fathers or fatherlessness and me not think of my dad, and I think I can't remember who I said it to, but it was just the smell of his cologne. It was just to see him in a shirt and tie that gave me a picture of him now that gives me a certain level of confidence that I can be who I am. Like, more importantly, I have learned more about living watching him die. And watching how he dealt with death has taught me how to enjoy how to live. And if I didn't see that being modeled in front of me, even from a kid, of having tough love, but then a father who would do like Jody and not spare the rod, spoil the child, but at the same time kiss me on my forehead. I mean, flying to Dallas, every time he would leave Dallas, they would be wheeling him through the airport in a wheelchair, and he would say, "Hey, boy, come here, reach down." And I know what it meant. He was going to kiss me on my forehead. And I think that part of it is really what we're missing. I think there's a part of fatherhood, it kind of gets grouped in with women being nurturers, but I think there is a part of fatherhood that is supposed to nurture the man that you're becoming. It's not to make you soft. It's not to make you, not be tough. It is a part of being a man is to show you love, the embrace of what you need, but also show you the tough love to say, you can't get away with that. Because just if I let you get away with it here, you'll go out there and they're going to treat you completely different. And I feel like just that model, like guys, if you're watching this, man, so many people are looking to be perfect fathers. We just need you to be present. We want you to be present because your kids are going to pick up so much from you with you just being present. From just a hug or, man, I got this. Your kids, my kids, my 3-year-old, they color, and I don't know what it is on the paper. That I colored a lion, but it's just a circle, just a crayon just with circles on it. But the reality is praising what they've done goes so much farther than anything that I could do.
Yeah, Pastor Travis, I just want to say the voice of the Father is dying.
Wow.
And so when I was an educator, the students would be numb to the voice of a female because most of the teachers are female. Yeah. But when they would hear my voice, there's an aligning. There's a pause first, and then there's an aligning. And I thought about when we were in the sanctuaries after church one day, and Zach came running out, and you called Zach, and so the fatherless voice needs to return. There's a scripture in Psalm 82:3. It says, "Defend the voice and the cause of fatherlessness." So there has to be a reemergence of the voice of fathers, not only for our sons, but for our daughters. Our daughters are on the front lines of the enemy's plan. He's coming after them so hard, so vigilantly, and we have to stand. If you are not a biological father, you can mentor. Yeah. You can be a part of some. You can be an uncle. There's something you can do to continue to help a young person's life. We need the voice of fathers. And you don't have to be a biological father to be a father.
And can I just say this? I'm going to add this and then we'll shift gears. I think one of the things that has to happen is I know that there are certain fathers who've missed moments that are trying to make up for lost time. And I want to speak to some kids or to some young adults and your father, he's missed some moments. But I want to tell you that if he's trying to make up for lost time, have a little bit of grace. Yeah. That the voice of the Father is not here to harm you. Maybe his voice, maybe his presence is here to help you. Yeah. And I just want you to pray. I want you to be open. Even if it's a latter part of your life, even if you didn't know who your father was, until now, or however, because we have complicated scenarios in our society. But if a father is being honest and really wants to be in your life, I would just urge you, whether it be a stepfather or your biological father, whomever it is, I would just say extend just a little bit of grace to him.
Yeah. Statistically, every student needs 5 positive role models, is what we tell our servant leaders. And like you were talking about mentoring, there's a lot of students, even here in the church, that don't have their parents around. And I encourage all of our male small group leaders to be that. You can't be the person's dad, but you can be a voice. You can be a voice that they will listen to, that they will respect. And a lot of times it's not always talking, it's modeling, right? And modeling matters. I love that. And that's what I love about our student ministry here, is that we have people that, it takes a village, right? And parents can't do it on their own, but imagine the impact of 2 different voices or even 3 different voices, but they're saying the same thing. Right. Imagine the impact that is happening in the lives of students. And I just would encourage, if you're a part of this ministry, we need male volunteers to step up and to be that voice, to model what it is to be a man of God, a husband, a father. Maybe they've never had that experience. They don't know what a dad looks like other than the Cosby Show or whatever they see on TV. That's what they get. But listen, you can be a voice for this next generation.
Wow. Thank you so much, Phil.
I just got one more thing, and I'll be quick with this. When Pastor Travers was talking about having grace for a returning father, I think we also, as fathers, have to have grace for their anger.
Yeah.
You're the man, you have the hard job. And if they're disappointed in you, you cannot extend your absenteeism any longer by saying, well, they don't like me anyway. You have to do the hard job. If that means that you got to listen to them cry, if you have to listen to them tell you how hard their mom worked and they praising Granny and praising Uncle Bobo for being there and you weren't, you have to do that. But when I have had to deal with fathers that are returning into their children's lives, I've literally told them, and this is the advice that I don't know where it came from, it just dropped down. I was helping one of my friends deal with his baby's mother, his son's mother. And I said, brother, you need to weaponize your love for him. He's like, what does that mean? I said, you need to love him so hard that you become irresistible to him. That even though he doesn't trust you now and doesn't want to be around you today, extend so much grace and love to him that he can't help but want to be around you. Wow. So if you've been that dad, and wasn't even designed to be this much fatherhood on this panel, but if you've been that dad that has been absent, you have to take it, own it, and then weaponize your love so that you can move forward.
Wow, that's amazing. Man, I've loved this segment about fatherlessness. The conversation has to continue. I want to shift gears just a little bit. We have Mr. Rudy Walker with us, who's also a deacon in our church, but he is also known outside of our church as a Christian banker. And, we want to shift gears to talk about the tension. There's a lot of conversation around diversity. There's a lot of conversation. People are scrambling to make statements. People are scrambling to put together workshops and different things to kind of refresh through diversity and inclusion training. What are you seeing? What are you sensing? What's happening in the corporate space that you feel like our parishioners and those that are watching, they need to hear, they need to be aware of?
Okay. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to serve on the panel. Very important conversations that are taking place right now in this moment. Start out by saying life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What does that mean? But also go back to Romans 1:16, and I'll just kind of paraphrase, for I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Take it into corporate America. Do you want to be politically correct or godly correct? That's a battle if you're a believer every single day. To be in corporate America, you have put in the work a lot of times. put in the work, but have you ever been in a situation where you have been present but been invisible? Wow. Being present but invisible. It is a proven fact that in this current time that we're in corporate America, more conversations about race are taking place right now like never before. Yeah. But the Harvard Business Review that took place in 2018, it talked about the African Americans that were surveyed, how many felt comfortable about talking about race with their company. 35% of those individuals that were surveyed said they felt comfortable. So that tells me that's a large group of individuals that don't feel comfortable talking about race. Now, many companies have core values. Right. They have mission statements to get individuals involved. But does the work go behind what is written? You see that a lot when it comes to in different industries. You're seeing individuals that have been blackballed when they speak up about how they feel about certain things. It's a proven fact if you look at the CEOs. Harvard also did a study back in 2008 around the number of black CEOs that were in corporate America. It was less than 4%. They came back in 2018 and did the same survey. It was still less than 4%. We have been talking about that. If you really put a time monitor on 2008 to 2018, we had the first black president in office at that time. That was a false sense of security that racial equalities were being erased. So many thought that we were beyond racial tension. But there's two words that I want you to really think about. Equality and equity. Equality means that everyone has the same thing. I have the same opportunity. I get to go to the same schools. I get the same opportunity to learn. But equity means something totally different. I'm selected. You're a select few. Do I fit into the conversation? Wow. So it's totally different. So when you think about diversity and inclusion, two things come to mind. Diversity means that I bring in a group of individuals that look different. But inclusion means that I'm included. I'm able to participate. Yeah. So corporate America has done a good job by recruiting individuals, but we have still a long way to go when it comes to bringing inclusion to everyone. So when I started out the conversation, it talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We were told to get a good education. Right. We were told to make the right choices. We were told to do all the right things in order to get a shot. A shot. Right. Not the opportunity, just a shot. A chance. And then what happens when you don't get that chance? Wow. So at that point, you have individuals that have been in corporate America for many, many years, and they're concerned. They're concerned. So a few weeks ago, we had the situation that occurred with George Floyd. And there was it hit the boiling point. Individuals that have been silent for many years, individuals that have been educated very well and done all the right things, gone to the schools, gotten degrees, gotten the proper training, where were looked over and they had to smile and say, okay, your shoulders are broad enough. You can take the pain. Sometimes the smile is the pain. Right. I'm hiding my pain with a smile. Wow. So you ask Pastor Travis, how is it in corporate America? Yeah. It's different right now. There's a lot of conversation taking place. A lot of individuals want to bring individuals to the table. But here's the thing. Are we going to be inclusive for a moment? Or are we going to be inclusive for a lifetime?
It's good.
So what I share with young executives, even individuals my age, even to myself, you have to validate yourself.
Come on.
Because if you wait on someone else to validate who you are, you can find yourself lost walking in the wilderness for years.
Let's talk. I mean, because you and I have had some conversations, and your experience. You are a banker. You're over several banks, but I want you to kind of share your experiences in terms of just being in those corporate spaces. More importantly, I don't want to give it away, but you mentioned something to me that there's been times that money has been missing in the bank. And what is your reaction? How do you feel? He's over a bank, some money is missing, and what happens?
I remember my early years of being a branch manager, and we had someone that embezzled some money. And my first thought was, I need to prove that I had nothing to do with it, even though I'm the supervisor. I found myself sitting in my office writing down a timeline. I was at lunch at this time. I did this at this time here. This person was here. Let's look at the film footage and things like that to prove that I was innocent.
Wow.
I remember sitting down with the corporate security officer, and he was asking, why are you giving me this information? Well, that's how I've been programmed all my life. That's my life.
Wow.
To talk about, I have to prove myself innocent because I am presumed guilty. So
if something comes up missing, but the inclination to even feel that or have to feel that is something that is deeply systemic in our society.
yes.
To say, I haven't done anything wrong, but let me put my hands up to ensure you that I was not a part of any scheme or anything. I'm innocent, but I almost feel like you're gonna think I'm guilty just because of the color of my skin.
Yes.
I'm not gonna let you catch me off guard. So I will premeditatedly prepare my speech just so that you know that I am innocent. And it happens, I think it's so interesting to hear Deacon Rudy talking about it, because this is in a corporate setting, but there are levels to this. And it doesn't change because you got your shot. It doesn't change because you wear a suit and tie to work. It doesn't change because you have several letters behind your name. In every level of leadership, in every level of authority and access that we're given, we're always checking ourselves, like, did I cross the line? And we're always trying to prove our innocence, because the presumption is, even as a manager, even going to lunch, even having been able to account for your entire day, there's this thought in the back of your mind that maybe, just maybe, I might be convicted of being black. And that is a crime that we've seen played out in the streets. We've seen it played out in society and in culture. And to hear that it's even in the corporate workplace that this presumption of guilt, presupposed guilt that leads us into how we interact with people. So if you ever see a young black man dealing with a police officer on the street, imagine that he's been programmed with this same presumption of guilt, that when I get pulled over for running a stop sign, do I know that I ran the stop sign? I'm not gonna tell you whether I know or not, because my automatic assumption is that you think that I've done something wrong. I drive a black car with dark tinted windows, and I've seen police literally turn around just to see who was driving that car.
Yeah.
And when they ask me, do you know why I pulled you over? No, I don't.
Yeah.
Because we always are in this place of trying to validate our space, trying to justify our personhood, trying to account for our being here. And my being here should not be a crime, because I'm a person, not a threat.
Yeah, Deacon Rudy, what I think about thanks, Joe, for sharing that. I think it's this skepticism that when anything happens, there's this personal skepticism that we have. Did I do something right? Did I do something wrong? Have I been checking? Have I been doing? There's this personal skepticism, but even in a wider space as George Floyd's situation, and we're gonna dial down into the racial aspect of things, the racial tension, but I think, there's this skepticism that we have to be honest as African Americans that when things happen in our culture, I don't care how much you are around white people, I don't care how much you are in the diverse settings, there's this skepticism that happens inside of some of us when things in culture happen between different racial groups. And I think that's some of the hurdles that we have to jump over, because there's this immediate skepticism I don't trust. I've been trying to trust you, and now here we go again, even though it's in a macro view, in a very minute or smaller view of ourselves, we go, even people in close proximity to me, I don't know if they trust me and I trust them, because now we have another thing in our culture where race is playing the biggest picture. It is singing the loudest song. So in your experience, what are you all doing, and what do you feel like companies, organization, nonprofit organizations, what do you feel like, no matter if it's a black organization, predominantly white organization, whatever it may be, what should companies be doing? How should they be seeing this moment and this time?
That's a very good question. I think one of the most important things is to lean into discomfort. If you're not uncomfortable in your conversation, you're not authentic. When you think about racism, it has touched everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone. It doesn't matter if you are African American or white or Hispanic or whatever. It has touched everyone. And it touched everyone differently. But the thing is, if you lean into the discomfort, that tells me you're listening.
Wow.
And if you're listening, we can put things into action. So not only should we be listening, we have to put things into action. That means that I have to have a seat at the table to make decisions. Don't use my knowledge to create a program. Let my knowledge be a part of the program, but allow me to be a part of the solution.
Wow.
That's important. So a lot of companies now are doing processes where they're doing committees within their company. They're asking individuals to come in and speak with them. But here's my fear. Are we only going to allow this to happen for a moment in time, or is this going to be something that we're going to continue? So I started out with the scripture, for I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. In corporate America, it tells you don't talk about politics, don't talk about race, and don't talk about religion. And that I struggle with that, because I'm a believer. Everyone else could talk about their religion. So why can't I talk about my religion?
Wow.
So you have to lean into the discomfort. If you have a voice, I have a voice. It is stated in the Bible that everyone is different. That's what makes us unique. That's what makes us so great, by being unique and being different. If we're all different, we have the ability to change.
Yeah. Wow. I think companies have to lean in, bring in diversity trainers, bring in people, and continually be, just as though a company would have annual reviews or quarterly reviews with people. I think there has to be ongoing trainings, insight, constant talks, constantly bringing different people of different shades of color. And I'll be honest, that I also feel like that in certain moments, in certain places, people have to look at their top tier leadership and says, are the people in this company represented
Yes.
at the top level?
That's good. No, I agree. I know we're talking about secular and corporate America, but I want to bring it home. And, I have a lot of pastor friends, and they're like, how do I get diversity? I mean, what do you mean, how do you get diversity? Be diverse. I always say this, let me look at your phone. All right, let me look at your phone. Let me look at the contents on your phone, the contacts. How many of them are diverse? If you have diverse contacts in your phone, it's a high probability you're doing life with people that don't look like you. And so to your point, Travis, a lot of our pastors, we're wanting diversity, and it stops with the praise team or the band. So I want to encourage my white pastors that they need to have people that don't look like you need to have a seat at your board, at your corporate table, at your leadership table. Yeah. Allow them to speak into what's happening in the organization. That shows that you are intentional about not just diversity, but as well as inclusion. So I want to make sure that we don't just put it in corporate America. This thing needs to happen in our churches. Yeah. It should start here. They should be able to look at our churches and see, wow, they're doing something so amazing there. We need to do what they're doing. Wow. So I want to make sure that we include that. That was awesome.
Yeah, I want to, we're talking about, inclusion, diversity, but I also feel like there's some things that have to be overcome. And myself and my brother-in-law, Marc, have talked very intensely about, our experiences, our differences, kind of growing up. Marc, I want you to kind of lean into how do we kind of overcome, how do we help people? Because I feel like, for me, I want to be a part of the change. I don't want to just be aware and be angry about what's happening, but I also want to say, well, let's talk this through. Let's have a strategy, but let's unpack some things. Marc, what do you feel what can people do to kind of overcome, their ignorance or even overcome prejudice?
I think, at least I can say from my standpoint that overcoming ignorance, overcoming prejudice, learning people better is a long-term process in a lot of ways. A lot of times we will tell ourselves, it took me 10 years to learn how to master money. I was terrible at budgeting. I made so many mistakes. Or, I wasn't good at this, but over time I got better. But no one really says, I was terrible at understanding, what other cultures, other ethnicities go through, but I got better. For me, it started, I was born and raised in Logan, West Virginia, which is a very small coal mining town. My father was a coal miner, and for 15 years of my life, I lived in West Virginia, and I cannot say that I knew on a first name basis anyone that wasn't white for 15 years of my life. A lot of that was basically dealing with the geography and the population. West Virginia is a highly white populated place. But for 15 years, I had seen black people, but couldn't tell you that I actually had anybody that I knew as a friend. I couldn't say on a first name basis. And so in 1992, 1993, I moved to Dothan, Alabama. I've lived in 4 states. This is my 4th state. Every time I move, I have gotten better at understanding race and prejudice every time that I move. So I don't know where I'm moving to next, but it's not going to be like Alaska or somewhere like that. Yeah. So when I moved to Alabama, things from a cultural standpoint were completely different. In the South, it is not nearly as, the population is completely mixed when it comes to racial population. I moved to Dothan, Alabama, and eventually moved to a small high school called Wicksburg High School, which in my graduating class had 50 people graduating in that class. Now, out of 50, 5 of them were black out of my 50. But 2 of those I met on the football field, Jamel and Jamal Harris. They were twin brothers. They didn't look alike, but they were twins. Paternal. Paternal, that's what it is, kind of like yours. Fantastic athletes, like the star of the town. Everybody knew their name. They lived in Wicksburg. They played for as long as I knew through they were like legends of the town. We became friends on the football field. And through that, we would give each other rides home. We started to become friends. And so I had a little Ford Ranger. They had a Geo Metro. We just all squeezed in. We made it work. We would swap driving each other to their homes. What that did, though, is through my friendship, my relationship with Jamel and Jamal, I overcame things that were inherently given to me as ignorances that I didn't know just because of lack of being around anybody of a different race. And that helped me to understand, even if I had certain preconceived ideas, that those were wrong. We were as tight as it could get. I went to their house. They came to my house. When Jamel graduated high school, he went on to play football at the University of Arkansas as a middle linebacker. Alabama football is huge. If you've never experienced Alabama football, there's nothing like it. And so I made a bet with Jamel that in his first year of college, if he would start against the University of Alabama and that Arkansas would win, I would get a tattoo of a Razorback. On my ankle, there is a tattoo of a Razorback because within about 15 to 20 seconds left in the game, Arkansas kicked a field goal and Alabama lost. And I got a call from Jamel shortly after going, when are you going to go get? So everywhere that you never knew that. Anytime I wear shorts, people go, did you go to Arkansas? Suey pig. I'm like, no, I've like barely been there. I lost a bet and I did that. We would travel though. I was the only white person with about 15 of his family members, and we traveled from Dothan, Alabama to Knoxville, Tennessee to watch Tennessee, Arkansas. We went to go see Alabama and Arkansas. We went to Florida to watch the Gators play. We went to Fayetteville, Arkansas. We went on these long road trips, and little by little, just through relationships, I learned to get over the barrier of anything that had been put in front of me that I felt a certain way about black people. So that was one hurdle. And then I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina. And I moved to Raleigh, I moved to Hickory, and then eventually Raleigh, I got married to Atlanta. Before I did, I moved in with Chris for like 2 or 3 months.
Oh, snap.
Me and Chris were roommates. So I went from black friends to now I live with a black man, right? Yeah. So I'm in a whole nother stratosphere, right? Of learning this whole racial thing. I learned in Raleigh what the black church experience was. I remember the first time that the congregation during February stood up and sang Lift Every Voice. I thought, I don't know anything about this song whatsoever. And the whole congregation, when Elder Vernon Chapel started singing Lift Every Voice, stood up and sang in unison. And I stood up because they did, and I just had to wing it, just humming it. That taught me a lot about black culture from a church standpoint. But it wasn't until I met Chris and Travis that I learned what the black experience was about really what it's like to be in black America, in white America as a black person, because Jamel and Jamal's relationship helped me understand and get over certain hurdles to where it was cool for us to be friends. But we never really got into a lot of conversations at being 17, 18 years old about what that was like. And it wasn't until years later that we would have conversations sitting around dining room tables. And I remember Travis, I've told this story, before, would tell me stories about how his father had to explain to him what it was going to be like if you ever got pulled over by a policeman. Wow. And how deliberate you had to be to say, I'm reaching for my wallet. I'm putting my hands outside my car. I don't have any weapons. I never had anything remotely close told to me by my mom. She said, listen, you're 16. Don't be an idiot. Don't get a ticket. I'm not picking you up from jail. That was it. That was the discussion. Wow. And so through conversations with the both of you, I started really learning about what it's like to be black in America. And every time I learn something different, there's a level of repentance that has to come as far as I'm concerned, because I say, God, I didn't know that. I'm sorry that I've either been a part of that, I've been complicit, I've not said anything. Yeah. And so it's through those conversations that I've been able to learn more about what it's like to be black in America. And so for me, how do we overcome? I feel like that the first thing that we have to do is realize that there is sometimes a longer process, but we have to be committed to that process. Every now and then I'll post something on my page when something like this happens, and I say, it's just a prayer, and I've prayed it, and it says, if there's any racism or prejudice in me, I ask you, God, to just drive every bit of that out of the crevice of my heart. If there's anything left in there whatsoever. So I feel like, one, we do have to have tough conversations. Yeah. Especially to the people that are listening to us. I've put out a couple posts the last couple of days, and I've titled them, To the White Delegation. To whoever the white delegation that still follows me, I will find videos that help me. And because you ever learned something new and you wanted people to know what you just learned?
All the time.
All the time. Travis will send me, he'll probably send all of us 50 million texts. You got to see this podcast, this video. This is what I'm learning. Like, no one learns like this man here. But for me, when I hear someone like Tony Evans say on our Faith and Prejudice video the other day that was playing, and he says, a lot of people are having a debate about Black Lives Matter, the entity. And he said, we cannot let the emphasis of Black Lives Matter be diminished by the entity of Black Lives Matter just because we don't agree with all of the tenets that they have. And some of us, we do agree with it. Some of us unashamedly, and there's no problem with that. He also put out a video in the other conversation, and this really helped me because he said, I want every white person to know about racism, that racism is real, but if you have a repentant heart, you are not operating out of white guilt. Because guilt means that you will never live up to what you did yesterday. You will always be punished by what you did yesterday. But out of love, my motivation to speak out against racism is not because of my guilt. My motivation is because of my love. It still doesn't negate me from being able to talk about it, but my motivation is different. And so I don't know if the white delegation is watching me today. I don't know if they're watching this, and hopefully they do. But I want you to know that you can overcome prejudice in your heart. You can overcome things that were taught to you that you didn't have any idea that they were being instilled in you. But it does take a lot of uncomfortable conversations, Rudy. It does take a lot of, when you hear someone talk about what it's like to be black in America and you want to dismiss it because it wasn't your experience, I have to lean in now and say, no, I don't have the option to dismiss that because it wasn't my experience. I've got to lean in and learn more and grow more, and I got to keep praying. God, if there's any bit of prejudice in my heart, drive every bit of that out of my heart.
Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful because I love Ken's and Ryan, but because you're doing that as a father, you're making sure that none of that stuff is passed down to that next generation.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a beautiful thing, man, just to take that responsibility. We have that responsibility, and I don't want to just look at it like white people are the only people that can be prejudiced. You know, I can have prejudice in my heart. Yep. Hispanics can have it. Asians can have it. I'm just saying, I think we all need to pray that prayer.
Yeah.
Like, God, if there's any wickedness in me, if that is in me, get it out.
I learned through study that a lot of times we use the word racism, we put it in one big bow and we just say, this is what our country is experiencing. But racism means, and a lot of times people of my color give themselves off the hook easy because they'll look at the definition of racism and is to feel that my race is superior to another race, right? And so someone goes, well, I don't feel that, so I'm cool. I ain't got to do nothing. Everything's good. But you haven't looked to say, is there any bigotry in you? Do you have a hatred toward or a dislike toward another race for whatever reason? So no, I get bigotry out of the way. Okay, but do you have prejudice? Do you walk into a situation and automatically think that someone is going to act a certain way? What's funny, and we could laugh about this, and I know this is a church setting, is that none of us are who anybody would ever think that we are. We're all different and unique. I can out hip-hop this entire stage. My knowledge of hip-hop
knows more rap than I do.
Please, Chris will tell you this. We laugh about this all the time.
Keys may rival you, though. You know,
well, he and I have rap battles. We have had rap battles before. But a prejudice would be to walk on this stage and feel like that everybody else would know something about hip-hop except for me. It's prejudging before you get the chance to talk and communicate and find out, what are you into? Yeah. What do you like? And so we give ourselves off the hook because, no, we're not racist, but are you dealing with all the other stuff that's out there too? Because that stuff is real.
Yeah. I just got one thing, that I wanted to say in this line of embracing the tension and understanding to what Deacon Rudy said and even Marc about having these uncomfortable conversations, that we have to have the right to disagree without becoming disagreeable. That there's a line between saying, I don't agree with what you're saying, and then taking an adverse position against someone. And what that means is that I walk into every conversation with the idea that I might be wrong. There may be a possibility that this whole thing can be seen differently from the way that I'm seeing it. And white people need to have this perspective, but black people need to have this perspective as well. Because when we bite into conspiracy, And we start posting things on social media and sharing memes. And this is really the man trying to get us. Do you see the little slave hanging on the $5 bill? Like, there's all sorts of there's levels to this conspiracy. And when we buy into it, it makes us disagreeable. And then the forward momentum that we want to happen won't happen because we've become so offended and offensive that we're no longer at the table having the conversation anymore. We're given a diatribe about why my experience is the most important experience and why my perspective of this situation is the only one that matters. So I implore you to have difficult conversations, to lean into the tension, and to disagree, even if it means you have to disagree that we don't see this the same way. But you cannot afford to take in your heart a seed of disagreeableness, a person that says, I will not agree with you no matter what you say. And no matter what you do, it's not enough because you don't understand my pain and you don't understand my adversity and you don't understand what it was for me to go to college and have to. No, I don't understand everything that you've gone through, but help me understand it. And I won't understand it by you just screaming at me. And so we have to position ourselves in a place to leaning into the tension means that I'm letting go of the idea that only my way is the right way, and that I'm embracing the possibility that someone else's experience may add to my life. I had white friends before. I told you all before that I grew up in an all-black community. I joined a Kojic church in college, and the minister of music was white. And he was married to a white woman. And they invited me to their house. And I became a godfather to their son. Little did I know that God was sowing a seed in my life that I would eventually join a church that was led by a white pastor and a white bishop. And I would be engrafted into a family that embraced me as their own. There have been times when we've had to have conversations where I've had to say, but can you see how this could possibly be seen another way? And I would only have license to offer my perspective if I had first pulled my chair to the table and listened to the perspective of others. Yeah. And so I'm encouraging everyone to lean into this tension. Be awkward, be uncomfortable, squirm in your chair, fight yourself that everything that you knew as a child and the things your experience was not. I grew up in a 2-parent home. So when my friends tell me about growing up in a single-parent home, I don't completely understand the context, but that doesn't mean that I can make their experience irrelevant. Right. I have decided that even if I disagree, that I won't be disagreeable.
Man, that's so good. Mark, to you and Chris and to Joe, that was so good. Phil, how do we lean into those uncomfortable conversations?
It's interesting that I'm getting this question because many of you that know me know that I don't like chaos. I'm not a confrontational person. But over the last couple of years, I've really had to lean in this and sharpen this tool in my leadership. Several years ago, I had a co-laborer, right? And whenever there was a situation or a conversation that we had to have, okay, we got to have this conversation, which means by we, that means you, all right? So, and not only did it happen here, but it happened at home as well. Wow. So when it was time for my daughter Alexis to get a verbal or a spanking, because we do that in 2020, I had to go to my wife and say, okay, babe, like you're gonna have to talk to Lexi. You're gonna have to talk to her. So leaning in this conversation, because here's a misconception. Not all conversation leads to confrontation. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Right? Like we can have a conversation and we can disagree and we can walk away and say, I just don't see your point. You're not going to see my point. But hey, Godspeed. You know what I'm saying? Not all conversation leads to confrontation. And I think we need to go into this conversation slow to speak, but quick to listen is what the Bible says. The Bible says to be wise as serpents, but gentle as doves. I've been in some conversations where people are at the edge of the seat. I got something to say. But it's like sometimes you just got to sit back and just listen, soak it in. Yeah. Listen. And because I think listening is a lost art. Like we want to be heard. We want to say the cliche things. We want people to retweet what we're saying. But listen, sometimes we just got to stop and listen. Because you know what? The person that talks the most doesn't always come off the way they think in their head that they're coming off.
Yeah.
Like, I know what I'm talking about, so listen here. You know what I'm saying? You're not coming off that way. You're coming off very arrogant and probably turning people off from listening to you, period. Right? So I think it's being able to listen, right? And then say what you need to say. You know, when there's an opportunity for you to say something and just leave it there. And it may rub people the wrong way, but like we can't live in a culture any longer where I'm afraid to say what I need to say because my mom told me a long time ago, we have what we allow. Right? And as long as we're not going to have this conversation, Pastor Chris, we're sweeping it under the rug, which we all know that it's not clean. It's hidden, but it's not clean. But it's going to come out later. Yeah. And so instead of hiding it under the rug, let's talk about it. Let's talk. And here's the thing. I get kind of nervous when, I don't know why I do it. Pastor Joseph points this out all the time. Why do I get a microphone and I'm yelling? It's a microphone and I don't have to yell. But listen, I grew up in a home where there wasn't a lot of raising of the voice.
Judgment thing.
There wasn't a lot of yelling, but as detrimental as being in a home with a bunch of yelling, even silence is detrimental. I learned from my dad and how he would handle situations where he would just shut down completely.
Wow.
Just shut down. Like literally, my mom is like having a conversation, just raising a couple of decibels, and then because that's how Spanish mothers speak. They're just natural, speaking loud. Okay.
Did you give us an example? No, just kidding.
Hey, Mom. They're having the conversation, and my dad just completely shuts down. And I found myself doing the exact same thing. Wow. Shutting down. And so I think almost as important as what you say, it's how you say it. Yeah. I think we all need to come from a place of love. I look at it now. I don't look forward to having those conversations, but I don't shy away from them because it's an opportunity to bring correction, but also bring into alignment, to let this person know, hey, I see you, and I'm pointing this thing out, but I see so many different things that you are doing right. I don't want you to stop doing what you're doing right. I want to just bring a little bit of correction and do everything with love, but don't shy away from the conversation. Have the conversations because it's so necessary, especially during this time, and don't let the conversation stop. That's what I mean. We've had these conversations before, and they just kind of simmer down and they die down. But consistency creates culture. And so we have to be consistent in our approach, not only just by what we say, but in our actions as well. Just be consistent.
Wow, Phil, that's powerful. I think
one line Phil, man. You got a lot of good one lines.
Right? Yeah.
What's your cash app, man? What's your cash app?
Like the dollar sound, Dr. D-O-C-T-A, Phil. Okay. It really is though
Phil, that's powerful because I feel like that's applicable in every area of our lives. And there are some habits that we have to shake because you can be raised in an environment where everyone thinks you're right, but you can arrive in a situation where you're wrong and still think you're right. And what happens is you shut down and don't realize that you're in a different moment, in a different season, and that you have to be able to hear. And I feel like America, and there's certain margins of America that because people think they're right all the time, because they're the dominant voice in certain scenarios, that they can't by no means be wrong about race relations. But when you're able to see a man for 8 minutes and 46 seconds with a knee on his neck and he's shouting, I cannot breathe, you can't deny what your eyes have seen. And what is happening now is those individuals who have been tone deaf, those that have turned a blind eye and have been ignorant on purpose. Because some people are not ignorant just because they don't know. They see it, but they look away from it because they don't want to embrace it. They don't want to acknowledge it. That's sweeping it under the rug. But we now cannot stand on the sidelines. We have to look at it in his eyes and say, just like Paul had to do it. He couldn't see. He was blind. He had to walk Even though he had to walk by faith, he had to walk by what he heard, and Ananias had to step into something uncomfortable and say, I know what I heard about Paul, but I'm going to embrace this moment, and I'm going to walk into the uncomfortable anyway, because I know that something is about to change. And what I'm so grateful for, and I don't know about you, but I'm so grateful that we have a pastor, Pastor Sheryl Brady, and Bishop Joby Brady, and a founder, Bishop T.D. Jakes, and First Lady Sarita Jakes, and all the other campuses. But more importantly, our pastor, Pastor Sheryl Brady, who has not silenced her voice. That she's raised her voice, and she has us, and have given us the space to share our voices on this matter. And we ought to clap our hands. You ought to put some hand claps in the comments, because we're part of a church. We're part of a church that is on the, not just simply on the front lines, but leading in some ways in what we're doing and attempting to do as a church, to be a voice into race and a voice into injustice. Hey, there's something that we want you to see. There's something exciting that we've been working on as a staff, working on as a church, that we want you to be a part of. And this video that we're about to show you is going to give you a glimpse into this big announcement, this thing that we're going to be leading in. So take a look.
The key to fixing it is right here in our local churches. And if local churches will come together, and if we will pray, and we will unite together, and we will say we don't just worship together, but we live together, and we do life together. And when you hurt my brother, you have hurt me. And I'm telling you, the reason the enemy is fighting like he is fighting in our nation is because we are getting ready to connect on a level that we've never connected on. We are about to put enemies that have been over our head underneath our feet.
The only way that change happens, especially when it comes to racial identity, is that white folks have to breach the system. They have to say, this is not okay.
In a society that's pulled apart, that's more divided and more polarized and more hate-filled every day, God has called you and he has called me to be a reconciler.
I believe that what we saw with Mr. Floyd and that the Caucasian, the officer that was on him, it was a true depiction of what black people have been trying to do for centuries. Just get off of me. I'm crying out. I'm crying out through the civil rights movement. Get up off of me. I'm equal. It was a perfect metaphor that America was forced to look at.
We gotta be our brother's keeper. We gotta refuse to be prejudiced. We gotta refuse to allow what divides us to be what greater than unites us. Stand up for people. Whenever you see injustice anywhere, you need to call it out. I challenge you to call it out.
Hi, I'm Sheryl Brady. God has never made a person that he doesn't love, that he doesn't have a purpose for, or that his son didn't die for. He loves every size, every shape, every shade, every race, because race is God's idea to begin with. God created race. However, people have created racism. And that is why racial reconciliation is so important to us as believers. Racial reconciliation is at the heart of the gospel. It is one of the things that Jesus came to do while dying on the cross. And it is not a minor issue to God. He hates injustice. As a matter of fact, the words justice and righteousness in Scripture mean the same. Therefore, to be righteous, we must be just. And we cannot be something God hates and call ourselves righteous. 2 Chronicles 19:7 tells us God will not tolerate perverted justice. And yet anyone who has eyes to see can see that it happens every day. If you are listening to me and you have experienced it, I am so sorry. It's not all right with me. And it's not all right with God. To those of you who are believers, it is time for us to go beyond merely having conversations and begin to do the critical, necessary work to bring about systemic change. For us to continue to stay divided, to watch those whose skin color that is different than ours be treated in a less than or an unjust manner, it is not pleasing to God. There are no easy answers, and yet it is very easy for us to get it wrong. So as a disclaimer today, let me say, if I get it wrong, please forgive me, because with all of my heart, I want to get it right, because it's personal to me. I have spent 40 years of my life in the African American church. They loved me. They embraced me. They fed me. They taught me to praise. They taught me to give sacrificially. And they made room for me at the table. And on countless occasions, it was their hands that wiped the tears from these blue eyes when I felt rejected by my very own. So yes, it is personal to me. For 30 years, my family and I have been submitted to one of the greatest black leaders God ever made. His name is Bishop T.D. Jakes. So yes, it is personal to me. 2 of my 3 son-in-laws are black. 7 of my 9 grandchildren are biracial. So yes, it's personal to me. The church I pastor is 90% African American men, women, boys, and girls. So it's personal to me. The Potter's House North has been doing the work since our very inception to fight against the spirit of racism and injustice. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't want to pastor a church that wouldn't take a stand against racism. Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and many other people no longer have a voice. But because we do, we have to speak out. We're committed to being a part of the solution, and we are asking you to do the same. Please join the conversation at tphnd.org/race.
Wow. Guys, we are so excited to announce our Confronting Racism and Injustice in America webpage that is going to, just be a voice to the voiceless. Hey, there's stuff about elections, there's stuff about exposing early resources for parents that you can have conversations with your children, exchanging experiences, as well as some videos and podcasts and resources for you. Businesses, local businesses, there's a list of local businesses, black-owned businesses in the DFW area that you can support. So I want you to take a look at this website. Hey, we just want to take a moment and celebrate the staff of the Potter's House North Dallas. All our staff have worked diligently, have worked hard to make sure that this page, to make sure that this resource is impactful. Shout out to the web designer and our marketing department that have just done an outrageous, just an incredible job on this. We're going to celebrate this. This is how we start the conversation. This is how we go into uncomfortable conversations. There's no reason why you should be lifting up your voices out at these marches and you're not registered to vote. That we have, you want to make sure that you're registered to vote, having conversations with your children. Also, there's resources. What I love about this, there are podcasts, there's books, there's different documentaries that you can watch. Why don't you I want to challenge you to go onto this page, grab a resource, grab a book, watch The 13th on Netflix, have some uncomfortable conversations with people that don't look like you. There's more to come with this, but we are excited to be supporting the vision of Pastor Brady in launching this page. So church, if you've been wondering, what have we been up to? Where are we at? Where do we stand? Let me tell you where we stand. We stand at www.tphnd.org/race. We have been fighting the fight for years, and we're going to continue this journey to be a voice to the voiceless. Thank you all for joining us for this edition of Don't Run From the Tension. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of this. Hopefully that you've been blessed. Hopefully that you'll take us up on this offer and go to the website, go to the webpage, and have some uncomfortable conversations. God bless.